Hello, welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high performing women. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into something that I have been ruminating about and thinking about, and that is, this idea that I always talk about of selfless syndrome, of our innate desire as women to take care of everyone and everything else, but not ourselves. And I've been thinking about this more in the context of what is going on that drives us to decide that we're not important and that everything else needs to take precedent over taking care of ourselves. And I'm going to share, I have, some insights and stuff that I've been gleaning from my studies and from just thinking about this some, but also from what I see in the women that I work with. Because at this stage, I've started as part of our intake process, you know, asking things like, "Do you take care of yourself?" And, "Do you do things every day that help fill your cup and rejuvenate you and, leave you feeling good and energetic? And, do you make time for yourself in your day? Do you rest?" And the answer from all of the women that I work with, there's not even like a 99%, this is every single one, right? Is no. They're answering these questions as no. And for those of you listening, if you haven't gone on this journey with me before, just pay attention to this because there's some keys here. And so I wanted to dive in, like, what is going on in our psychology, in our brains, and our choices that we somehow decide that we're not important enough to make time for ourselves. And there's a couple different layers to this that we're going to dive into. But the first thing I want to address is I hear from a lot of women when I talk about this idea of selfless syndrome. Well, isn't being selfless, not selfish, selfless a good thing? And it is to an extent. It's possible to overextend ourselves in our level of selflessness that we start to see what I see in the women that I work with. And that's losing sight of the things that actually refill your cup or you feel inspired by or you're excited about, and not making time for yourself, not even knowing what your real needs are as a human in the world, not knowing what your body needs and what your emotional needs are because you're always just go, go, go and always focused on everyone and everything else. And some, pieces to this, I think it's worth mentioning and part of our plight. I've referenced Dr. Libby Weaver's work. She has a TED talk on like the plight of the modern day woman, more or less. But essentially what we're talking about is, as we've advanced as a society and with technology and with crazy kids who have to do like 50 million activities in order to get into college and all of this stuff. Like, we are just constantly on the go and juggling all the balls. And now more women, like most of the women, work outside of the home, whereas 50, 100 years ago, they didn't work outside the home. Like, the home was their job. And there's still some of us who are in that role, right? But we have added stuff to it now. And so we've got all this stuff and we're constantly operating in some level of stress, whether or not we acknowledge it as that. And our bodies don't actually know the difference. They don't know the difference between, like, we used to have a stress response because it was what we went into to escape the tiger that was trying to catch us and eat us, right? The bear, wherever, like, whatever predator works in your world for imagining this. And in the modern day world, we don't have predators anymore per se, but we have other things that are evoking the similar response in our body. And because of that, we are just constantly in that fight or flight stress mode. And I've talked quite a bit about this on the show. But more importantly, what that's leading to. And I would make the argument, there's some understanding we have to have, but for us as women, there's just like weird psychological thing. And men might deal with this too, but I think it's much more common with women because men can compartmentalize and just be like, "Oh, I'm done with that," and like not think about it anymore. Whereas we stress out and think about it all the time. So as men and women, like not as men, as women, we we have this thing that drives us. And so I'm curious about what is this thing? And I have a feeling this is what my dissertation is going to end up being about later this year. But what is this? What pushes us to decide we're not worth taking time for? And so I've identified kind of three different types of women who exhibit selfless syndrome. And so three different causes, if you will, if we get into root cause stuff. And what they are we have the women who legitimately just all of these are rooted in some level of self-worth conversation, but there's the women who really just don't see themselves as being valuable at all. And so it is not important to take care of themselves or, even shower for that matter. Like they are just not even on their radar is mattering. And it has everything to do with this conversation of like, I'm not valuable, I'm not worthwhile, I'm not worthy, I'm not, they don't view themselves that way. This is hard, this is confronting. So if this is you, like, no, there's a path out. But sometimes we have to identify what's the yuck underneath, right? So that's the first type. And these are the women who will also say, like, I feel guilty anytime I do anything for myself. I should be doing all this other stuff. Like, why should I matter? Why am I important? And let me just take a moment to say, you're only as good to the people and things you love and care about. You're only as good as you are healthy. And so when we decide we don't matter, we end up not being as present and as capable and as good for those people that we love and care about. So that's number one. The second type of person that I see kind of going down this road of selfless syndrome are my type A perfectionists. You know who you are. And these are the women who everything has to be perfect. And if it can't look a certain way, they're just not going to bother with it because it's not going to be right. And it's going to bother them too much that it doesn't look like they want it to look like. And so what's the point? That's them. There's a couple clients I think of specifically when I think about that person. And so they basically never even get started with self-care. They might recognize that it's a good idea, but they just can't get past that it has to look a certain way. And then the third category is the one that I actually fall into, and I think quite a few of our listeners do as well. And this is still a self-worth conversation, but those of us who are driven by achievement. And so our worth is actually tied to what we have or have not achieved in our lives. And very rarely do we take on tasks and projects and things to achieve that involve actually taking care of ourselves. They're about proving something to the world, right? And so we are, it's always about the next thing. We never celebrate. And it's always about, well, okay, I finished that. What's next? Like we just don't stop. And there's no break, right? And I've recognized like this patterning is very ingrained in myself and was all through undergraduate and then graduate school. And now I'm still in graduate school technically, but I've recognized in how I ran my business and how I've done, a lot of things in my life. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to start running again. It's like, oh, I'm going to train for a marathon. Why? What's the point? Why do we need to take it so far? It's like we pick something and then we take it too far. And so this ultimately ends up impacting us because we're staying in stress response. We're completely disconnected from what we need. And we move in that, not having boundaries. And so there's kind of these three different directions that can lead you down this road. And where this road leads is, things I commonly see are thyroid issues and issues with the digestive tract, with your small intestines in particular, and your colon and your liver and detoxability, either constipation or IBS, or, there's all kinds of kind of digestive things that I see, weight gain, not being able to get the weight off. And for a lot of women, having them, autoimmune stuff, immune system not functioning properly. And this stuff, it just builds and builds over time. And I make the argument that it's because we're stuck in these patterns where somehow our self-worth is being defined by something that does not serve us in actually taking care of ourselves. And so we push and we push and we push and we ignore ourselves more and more and more. And we end up stuck, not feeling well, not having our bodies functioning well, and not really knowing what to do about it or how to get out of it. And ultimately, we end up with these diagnoses that we allow to define ourselves. And that's just kind of it. And so I'm here to shake this whole thing up. That's what this is about, ladies, and really provide the path and the framework to move out of that, and not to the point of selfishness. It's possible to take this too far and be the mom or the parent or the grandma who like never makes time for anyone else in their lives and it's always just about them. We don't want that either. It's, finding that happy medium where we have the capacity to both give and receive. And for a lot of us, we are not allowing ourselves to receive. And so we're burnt out. We literally have nothing left in the cup to give to anybody else. And we're just floundering, if you will, in life and with our health and not getting anywhere. So, we really have to, I think, make a conscious effort and commitment to recognizing these patterns in ourselves and starting to do the work that we need to do to unwind them and start to allow time and space for us to show up in our own lives as being something of value and import that matters, and realize that when we do that, we have more to give to everything around us. So I'm going to wrap this up here. This is like the third time I've recorded this because when I did it as a live yesterday, I had a dog and a kid who kept interrupting, and I can't for the life of me edit out sound. So I re-recorded this. My dog did bark once. I apologize. But and I was going to share something on all of this of like now my husband's on the phone. So we're going to wrap this up. But we have to, if you're a perfectionist, like sometimes you just got to let stuff go, right? And be okay and say, like, it's going to be okay. We're just going to put it out there because, it's about starting somewhere. That's what I want to say. For each and every one of us, we have to start somewhere. Maybe it's around setting boundaries around, the projects we do or how late we work, or like I'm very capable of staying on my computer late into the night, either doing school or continuing my work day because I work from home. And it's just like, well, I work 24/7 now. There's jokes out about that. For others, it might be limits on or boundaries around what activities you're committed to or your kids are committed to, or, boundaries around 15 minutes when dad gets home and mom goes somewhere else if mom's home all the time. Like we have to be willing to start making those small steps and recognize they're not going to be perfect right away, and they're not going to, it's going to take us a while to get back to where we need to be, but we need to really make the time and commitment to get ourselves to that place where we matter to us and to our family. Like we matter to our families, right? We matter to our jobs and our careers. And some of us might have stories about how we don't. I had this conversation with a client earlier today, but we really do. Right. And, part of it's reconnecting to that truth and recognizing that, and then starting to make the steps to show up in your life again. And when you do that, your energy shifts, your body starts to shift, your, symptoms can shift. There's more that we have to do, obviously, but it all starts from here, I would argue. So now that my husband is on the phone, I'm going to wrap this up and we will see you all next week. Please reach out. Part of what I do is help women unravel and unwind, like getting to this root cause stuff. So if that's not something you've done and you are just a pile of diagnoses and wondering what you're doing wrong and also feel like you're, never have time for you in your life, this is where to start. So please reach out, send me an email, dralex@emergentwomencoaching.com, or reach out on social media. And I'm here to help you navigate that and start to put all this back into your life, right? All right. With that, we will see you next week.